Hello, everyone. I see we are still connecting to audio a little bit, so we'll give everyone an extra minute to just log in and connect to audio. This is also streaming on Facebook, so let some people go see the live on Facebook. If we could just make sure everyone is muted. You are welcome to turn your cameras on. You don't have to. Cameras on, mics off. All right, so.
Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. So I'm going to get, I'll give it like 30 more seconds because some more people are entering the waiting room. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Leah Russo. I am the Continuing Education Assistant here at the NASW New Jersey. I'm just going to go through some quick housekeeping real fast. If everyone could just keep their microphones off, you're welcome to turn your camera on. But just so you know, everything is being recorded and streaming live on Facebook right now. So if you are going to say something, make sure that it is respectful and that you wouldn't mind it being broadcasted. So I am going to introduce our presenters. Christopher Kellogg, MSW, LSW, is the co-owner of Nightingale NJ and an elder care consulting firm that helps seniors and their adult children to make sound choices when confronted by a confusing array of medical, financial, legal, and emotional matters related to aging. Chris has been a passionate advocate for seniors throughout his more than 20 years of long-term subacute care. An exceptionally empathetic and experienced aging life care professional, Chris is adept to simplifying complex medical and procedural information into language meaningful to clients and their families. Chris earned BA degrees in psychology and sociology from West Virginia Wesleyan College. He earned his MSW from Boston University with a concentration in gerontology in 2001 and was awarded the Lois Lowry Scholarship for Excellence in Gerontology. He has been practicing as a New Jersey board certified licensed social worker for more than 20 years and volunteers his time for the Alzheimer's Association of New Jersey and serves as the vice president of the board of trustees for volunteer guardianship one-on-one. Julie Hanley, MSW, LSW, has been working for multi-service nonprofit organizations for over 30 years in various direct service management capacities that have helped maximize opportunity and support the empowerment and autonomy of various vulnerable populations. Julie recently made a career shift in order to help create improvements in how we care for our most vulnerable older adults, becoming the executive director of Volunteer Guardianship One-on-One in August 2022. Julie holds a BS in the Administration of Justice from Penn State University and earned her MSW from Rutgers University with a concentration in nonprofit management. So Chris and Julie, thank you both for being here. We appreciate it so much. We are going to listen to them talk, and Julie and Chris have requested that if you have a question while we're talking, if you could just raise a virtual hand or put it in the chat, I will direct them to answer your questions, and then we will also have question time at the end. So Julie and Chris, thank you so much for being here. It's all yours now.
Great.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to share the PowerPoint and Chris is going to start us off. And if you have any questions as we move along, please feel free to ask. Okay.
Great.
Take it away, Chris.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for coming out and learning a little bit more about guardianship for incapacitated adults. What is guardianship? Guardianship is a process of trying to restore a voice for people that are cognitively, emotionally, or mentally challenged that are not able to clearly have their own judgment and insight. These adults have different cognitive disabilities that have developed a dementia or suffered a stroke or a traumatic brain injury, people with different intellectual or disabilities, and also people with mental illness. And finally, it's also for people that have chronic drug or alcohol abuse. Just again, helping people be safe and be autonomous and helping them make their voice be heard. Next slide, please. Great. Determining incapacity. It needs to be verified. And why do we do this? It needs to make sure that the person who is trying to have the guardianship or needs guardianship warrants true guardianship. The first step is having someone bring the concern to the court's attention. What is warranting the need to bring a guardian on board? There's a process that needs to be certified by two different physicians. Generally, one is a psychiatrist and then another physician within the first 30 days of going to court. Again, then going to court, you have to have your judge listen to what is the reason, having the documents in hand and being able to start the process and having an attorney be there following up with what the two doctors have said to put it all in a case. You would have that next step would be a hearing, so that the person that is going ahead and trying to get the guardianship or is presumed needing the guardianship has that opportunity to say, defend why it's not necessary, or confirm with the attorney with the data that's been gathered from that attorney with the two doctors saying, why is this necessary, to try to keep them safe. So, okay, so one question is, are you saying there, somebody wrote a question there, it popped up and then it went away, Julie?
Yeah, I see it. So are you saying a doctor, psychologist? Does it have to be an MD psychiatrist? Can it be a PhD psychologist? I don't know the specific credentials. I believe it has to be some type of medical psychiatric doctor, that two people that have to interview the person, go through some type of cognitive testing to show that in fact that they are incapacitated. Two individual separate people have to do the examination. I can get the details on the credentials. I'm not 100% sure. Chris, do you know?
It does need to be through a licensed physician, whether it be psychiatrist or psychologist. And it's not just the cognitive capacity. There's been scenarios for people that we've helped that have had guardianship be placed, and they're alert, they're able to do well on different screening tools like a BIMS or a mini mental status, but they have such impaired judgment or insight, it really challenges them being able to be independent, and that then brings us into the scenario of where is the appropriate domicile for them to keep their care needs be safe. Who brings the complaints forward? Oftentimes it's a family member or a nursing home that there's already been a change of status happen, but who is able to speak for them? An adult adult protective service has been doing that, or different hospitals, because someone's not able to sign off on the paperwork because they just don't have the insight of making their needs be met with understanding the risks and the benefits of that. Okay.
Sorry, can you see when I'm chatting? Is that covering the screen?
Partially.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure that we don't go too far ahead without having the answers. There's two different types of guardianship. Again, the first is the guardian of person and their responsibilities. The guardian has to determine where are they able to live and check on them to making sure that they're safe. Consenting to different types of medical treatment, consenting and monitoring medical services or non-medical services to make sure that their voices are heard, releasing and signing information over so that the left hand understands what the right hand is doing as far as billing purposes, that sometimes there is overlap between the guardian of person and the estate. Being able to sign appropriate end of life care requests, signing off on a document such as a post. Again, a lot of the research that goes in by that attorney are prior to the guardianship is who are those other people of influence in their circle of influence? What sort of information can be gathered so that the decisions that are being made can be as close to what the known wishes, hopes, and expectations were of that person before they lost that capacity. Again, that goal is to try to keep them as independent and also be able to live in the most least restrictive area while keeping them be safe and also maximizing their autonomy. Then you have the guardianship of property and estate. Again, the estate is the person's personal property, whether it be tangible or intangible, anything of ownership that they may be able and have to be able to monitor, being able to document those items within the first 90 days. Oftentimes the court looks to have that inventory, managing assets, understanding what they are, what sort of efforts need to be done to maintain them to be able to potentially pay for future care, getting appraisals of what those assets are so that the court is able to make sure everybody's looking through the same set of lenses, protecting them from people that, again, whether it be scams or other scenarios, to make sure that the person's resources are going to be able to be paying for the future care needs, receive income from the assets itself. So are there potentially dividends involved to be able to pay for care needs? Really, that guardian is encompassing all of that ward's care needs and having the resources to be able to pay for that in the future. Also being able to keep track and present everything to the court, generally within the first year, so that there's a check and balance. I understand that there was a chat that came up.
Yeah, the question, what happens if you do not report to the court annually about guardianship? So, I mean, there's the guardianship monitoring program that New Jersey has. And I don't know, eventually, I don't know what would happen. So I work for an organization where that never happens because we are, we provide a lot of oversight. I suppose eventually if they were, falling down on the job of the annual requirements to the court, they would end up terminating it. But I don't know that that's actually happened. Chris, do you know?
I do think if someone fails, and again, there's a stepwise process of checks and balances. Where are you? And warnings. That's the whole, one of the main purposes is making sure that there's additional oversight and support, and the guardian who signs on to take that responsibility takes an oath. I mean, you go to court and you say, I'm willing to take this responsibility on. And just like if you go to your job and you do several no calls, no shows, eventually there is going to be termination, to what Julie says.
All right.
Again, the trends in New Jersey, you can see there's 23,345 active cases in 2021. The public agencies and responsibilities account for only a small component. Again, more of that are through families, and which is important because, you know, it can be really time consuming to be able to try to give the oversight and the emotional support that many of the wards need. And with the world that we're all living in, the complexities are only going up, whether it be completing a document if they're living in the community to try to get them signed up for additional services. It just takes time. Again, it's varied. Growth rates in different counties are going up. You can see the slide just from what we're talking about. I would appreciate additional information on the process of setting up guardianship. We can help you with that a little bit later. Julie would be happy to share that information. And again, next slide, please. You can see that the need is going to only go up. And again, a lot of this is because of the graying of our country and essentially the world. What we are seeing right now, the numbers will continue to leapfrog. And I know I'll share a personal story. Before starting Nightingale, I was a director of social work at a local subacute and long-term care facility in central New Jersey. I had a resident that broke a tooth. I was consider myself friends, and in addition to colleague, to that resident's guardian, and my heart broke for the resident and also that guardian who was through the county, that it took over 2 days to be able to have the guardian contact me, sign the waiver so I could have a dentist come in to be able to take care of that tooth. I'm not throwing any other social worker under the bus. That's the least of my wishes. But all of us, I think, in the world we live in and the roles that we play, you know that there is a maximum capacity of caseload. And I could not have done any better if I was trying to manage that person's caseload. And that's one of the reasons why, when I learned about volunteer guardian, about the opportunity, about having a ward, have one person being their voice, that was a non-brainer. And that's why I became just so interested in wanting to be active and eventually coming to be vice president of the board. Julie?
I just want to add one more thing to this slide. We're hearing more and more about the needs for the developmentally disabled community because they're living much longer and their parents are aging and their parents are very worried about long-term planning for their children. So I think that's also a growing population of people that are going to be needing more guardianship in the future. So I'll jump in here. Social determinants of health. You guys are all familiar with this as social workers. You know, health does not occur in a bubble. It occurs with the overlap of all these other social factors of where you grew up and where you live and what is your access to healthcare. And, you know, people that have higher incomes tend to have better health outcomes. So that's, you know, it's all very interlocking and issues that you all probably face on a regular basis. Poverty, you know, is very complex, and, you know, poverty is, there's so many systemic issues that flow into that. You know, if you don't have a lot of money, you can't live in a a decent community that, you know, maybe you have a food desert, so you're not eating as well and you're not getting to the doctor, which increases your risk of stroke. And maybe your children have issues. So when you are old and maybe get dementia, they can't care for you because they have their own issues going on from having grown up in a certain situation. So there's just a lot of overlap. And I see some chats. Can somebody else look at the chat and ask the questions? And then
Yep,
that
I
way,
got
that way I
you.
won't keep looking at the chat and trying to talk. There was one study, you know, there's many reasons, and I'm going to focus a little bit now on guardianship of people that don't have a friend or family that can take over as a guardian. And three of the main reasons that sometimes happens in one study, and you know, there's lots of different studies, but basically it's a negative behavior of one person that has caused an estrangement, whether it's a history of abuse in the family, there's been an addiction issue, whether it's on the part of the person that's become incapacitated or the person that might be the obvious person to step in. Mental illness is a big thing. We're getting several folks now with really severe mental illness that, you know, the family is just like, I just can't, you know, they might want to, but it's just too much. And then external factors like just geographic distance, or, you know, maybe a spouse is saying, you know, we're not doing that, or, you know, we have our children to deal with, or whatever it is. So there's so many factors, but a lot of them, again, come back to this social determinant of health and the influence that might have on people that might need guardianship. And I just throw out the COVID-19 pandemic as an example. You know, we all saw it, you know, in real time, what happened to people in certain impoverished communities of color just did not have that same access to healthcare as other communities, and you know, died at huge numbers. And I don't know if we'll see the impact in terms of, you know, guardianship, you know, down the line, but it, you know, a lot of chronic health conditions again in communities because of all these other social determinants. So I just wanted to bring that into the conversation. I see 4 chats. Is there anything I should answer now, or should I keep
Nope.
going?
Nope,
Okay.
it's just discussion from the past.
Oh, okay, great. So who serves as a guardian? As I said, a family or friend, but if there's no family or friend, they've been called, depending on who you talk to, the unbefriended or the unrepresented, and the guardianship is referred to as a public guardian. So then what happens? Well, we see that attorneys are serving as guardians, and often they're paid, you know, and a lot of times it just depends on how many resources people have. There's the state office of the public guardian through the Department of Human Services, and those are for people that are 60 and over. And that's sort of the situation Chris was alluding to, where you have people doing their best with, you know, a caseload of however many, you know, we're not exactly sure what those caseloads are. You know, visiting them anecdotally, we hear, you know, maybe they visit, you know, once every 3 months, and not maybe for as long a time as you might need to really get to know somebody. Don't hold me to that. That's an anecdotal story. We don't really know exactly, but they don't have the requirement to visit monthly, which is the requirement that my organization has. The Bureau for Guardianship Services is for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. There are people that do private guardianship. They're private paid guardians. And there's an organization, and I'll get into that in a minute, called the National Guardianship Association. They have a certification, so you can become a certified guardian. We have 6 in New Jersey, and one of them happens to be the former president of my board. So we have that expertise in-house. But a lot of guardians are acting as paid guardians, but there's not a ton of licensing or anything for those folks. SCARC is an organization some of you might be familiar with. It's a nonprofit organization. They serve mostly northern, I think it's Bergen County, that particular area. They're very highly regarded. And they use their staff to serve as guardians. And they serve just folks with individuals with developmental disabilities. And then there's the one that I wanted to talk about, Volunteer Guardianship One-on-One, which I'm the executive director of, and we're a nonprofit organization. And we screen and train volunteers to serve as guardians, and we match them one-on-one with volunteers one-on-one, a volunteer with one incapacitated person in the community. So I often call it like the big brothers and sisters, or the CASA of guardianship, if you're familiar with those programs. Let's see, I'm just curious. Okay, all right. And yeah, here's my little cover page. So just a little bit about our organization. We've been around since 1996, 501c3. We're headquartered in Flemington, New Jersey, and historically we've served this area, but we are really reaching out past this area and serving. Right now I have somebody from Monmouth and Passaic, and we have a few folks in Somerset, and we're really growing the model sort of one guardianship at a time throughout the state. We're governed by, as I mentioned, the National Guardianship Association Code of Ethics. So it's very specific. I'm going to highlight a few of those in a minute. We're governed like any nonprofit by a board of trustees, and we're a little bit different, perhaps. We stack our board of trustees with professionals such as Chris, experts in different fields. Like social work, medical, financial, all the many complicated things that go into being a guardian, because our guardians are just people living in the community. So, they have a lot to manage. So our organization not only provides oversight, but we provide access to any number of professionals that can give advice or direction if they have questions. We're pioneering. There's nobody else in New Jersey doing it the way we do it, and very few in the country. Others in the country do use volunteers, but most of those fall under a government entity of some sort. So we're one of the very few nonprofit organizations that do one-on-one guardianship. Let's see.
We do have some questions in the chat.
Okay, sure. And there was another question that was earlier about how to bring a guardianship case, I think, that was asked a little earlier. Because we don't, just to make it clear, we don't bring the guardianship action. So those things that Chris was talking about, that really has to be brought. So for social workers, a lot of times you would be like the first person that sees that there's something going on. Probably a referral to APS is what's going to trigger, because it costs some money to do a guardianship action. You often have to pay the lawyers, you have to pay the medical professionals, so there is a certain level of cost involved in the legal piece of the guardianship that my organization is not involved in. But if you did have somebody that you thought needed guardianship, if you can get the referral done through like a hospital or nursing home or a place that has budget to cover that sort of thing, that would be the best way to go. But it does need somebody to make the claim that triggers the rest of the things that go into creating a guardianship. I hope that answered that question. What else do you have?
You mentioned the guardians of the disabled are aging. What happens if the guardian passes away before the disabled person? Can any other person step in to help the disabled person, or does it need to go through the court system to get new guardian paperwork?
So you're saying if somebody has a guardian who passes away and there's been no other arrangements made? I think that's what that question is asking.
I assume that is what that question is asking.
I mean, so that when you go from one guardian to the next, it's called a substitute. And first, a disclaimer, I'm not an attorney. I don't pretend to be an attorney. These are just things that I've kind of been learning through my time here. So please don't take anything as legal information that I'm sharing. But I mean, I suppose if there was a concerned neighbor, and we've actually had some cases where, people that knew the person became aware that they had nobody else, like a former neighbor was like, oh my God, we love Willie, we want to be his guardians. And he had actually fallen under the umbrella of OPG. He was like a former gardener, he came from Spain, he never had any children, and they loved him, and they all lived in the same neighborhood. And then they moved or whatever, and Willie became, had dementia, and I don't know all of the backstory, but he ended up in some nursing home in like way South Jersey, far away from where he grew up. And when they found out, they're like, oh my God, we want to be his guardians. But they had, because he was already with the state, but it was a but they were like, we don't know anything about being the guardian. So that's when they reached out to our organization for support and guidance on how to get him back from the state, you know, and then to become assigned as his guardians. So I don't know exactly what that would look like. To answer your question, I'm not sure I can, Chris. I don't know if you could add to that.
No, it's because again, it's a legal proceeding. There are going to need to be new paperwork drawn up, unfortunately, because of that, removing the one-time guardian because of them passing to having the new person's name be put on all of the documents for the guardian of person and estate.
Right. We have several parents of several aging parents of disabled children have called and asked the question. And, you know, I said, well, you could put it as a desired action in your will to contact our agency, but our agency cannot be guardians. But at least it would give some direction, like, you know, before just reaching out to, you know, the state taking over or whatever, to make a call to us and you know, and take it from there. But it does need a specific name. But yeah, I would think a neighbor, a caring neighbor could say, hey, I would like to be, there's, and I'll get into the screening process. There are background checks and screenings involved in becoming a guardian. So we recruit people interested in becoming guardians. Some people say, why would anybody want to do that for somebody they don't know? And you would be surprised. I think our average guardian volunteers over 50. A lot of them are retired. A lot of them have cared for aging parents or don't have any children or obvious person that might fulfill that role for them. So they're kind of paying it forward. So we get a lot of different motivations. Thoroughly screen and train our volunteers. And we have a very, you know, robust training program. They go through a background screening, we do background checks, we check references, and then we match people. And in the matching process, we try to look at culture, which is so important, you know, people that, you know, live in the same community, maybe share some cultural values, and then, you know, have them meet each other, and then we make the match. And then we supervise them in carrying out their fiduciary duties, which are all those things that Chris talked about, which is where will they live, and, you know, what kind of medical care, and all these types of different things. And then we also do some community education on a variety of topics related to guardianship, aging, long-term planning. And actually, we have a training tonight, which I'm going to show you a flyer. If you have nothing on your agenda for this evening, it includes a free dinner. And it's not too far from the Bridgewater area. If you guys, I think it's in Hillsborough, so I'll show you guys a training for that. And I think I already kind of covered all this. We do recruitment, we screen people, we do an interview, background, references, there's an orientation training. And then, you know, we have our own background training, and then the court, before you're actually named as a guardian, does a much more, not much more, but they do additional background, FBI, nationwide type background screenings. And these are just a few photos of some of our guardianships, and you can kind of see the difference between sort of a government attorney type model and the model that we have. It really is community members, you know, just being there for a fellow community member. This fellow Kent is our former board president, so he just was so passionate about it. He was a guardian and just really, you know, had a huge impact on him. And then these are just volunteers that have, you know, been guardians. Outcomes, I see like 11 chats. Any of them that I should know about?
I'm going to hold those questions until the end.
Sure, absolutely. And just outcomes, autonomy is maximized, and I'll talk about this in the next slide. And, you know, our tagline is, you know, you are never alone. And that goes for the guardian and for the incapacitated person. You know, there's always somebody that can be reached, you know, at 2 a.m. if need be, you know, because sometimes crises occur at 2 a.m., you know, so we're reachable. You know, we have an on-call system. for our guardians, and then they're reachable. So if they're living in a nursing home or what have you, those folks can be reached at any time as well. Existing assets are protected. You probably all seen nightmare movies and heard stories about people being exploited. And some people have come to our organization through Adult Protective Services, where somebody had property and the kids sold it, and now this person is nothing, and none of that money was used for the benefit of that person. And just stories I'm sure some of you are familiar with. So we, because of our oversight and because they have to do the annual accounting to the court, there's just a lot of checks and balances. They live in a safe and stable environment, least restrictive possible, as Chris talked about. And this is an important piece. This is for me a really strong theme of guardianship that our agency, and I'm sure other guardians do try to follow. They receive the care that they would have chosen for themselves had they had full capacity. So again, trying to maintain that person's autonomy as much as possible. Yes, they have been found to be incapacitated, but anybody who's had a relative with dementia, that it's not the same all the time. Things differ, and if you knew them when, then you have an idea of who they were and what they might have done. So really, we do try very much to have our volunteers try and make those decisions, not necessarily what they would do for themselves or for their family member, but what would this person really have chosen? Make sure they're, have access to entitlement programs. Anybody that's ever done a Medicaid application knows what a headache that is, so walking through that long process. And then any enrichment activities, so really, again, a really personal one-on-one nature, getting to know who the person is and trying to, enrich their quality of life as much as possible. And this is just how to refer somebody in need of guardianship to our organization. We have a referral form. It's on our website. So if you just click, you'll get our referral form. And then usually we'll call you back. We'll ask some questions. We might want to talk to other people that are related. We had a referral from an attorney of a hospital, but the person already had a guardian that was another attorney. And we're like, well, maybe we should talk to that other attorney. So we kind of do a little discovery ourselves just to get a good sense of who this person is. Once we've accepted the incapacitated person, we look for somebody to match with them. And then our recommendation is made to the judge. And, part of my job is really to have judges know who we are, and in the surrogate's office, and really trying to get out there. And in Hunterdon County, they've known us forever. Actually, the surrogate of Hunterdon is one of our founders. She's really familiar with us. I think we have a long way to go in terms of the rest of New Jersey and educating people. But because, a judge would be like, well, they don't know each other. That's one of the things they look at is what is the history of the relationship? And our folks don't have a history. So which really, again, makes it important to understand the agency and how we work. And if the judge approves it, and then the guardianship is established and our volunteers move forward with their fiduciary responsibilities. We don't accept everybody. Because we do have to match them with somebody, there are some people that we might say it's just not appropriate for us, because if there's an active substance abuse issue, if somebody has a current history of violence, those types of things we might have to screen out. And compatibility with social work core values. You're all familiar with this: service, social justice, dignity and worth of the person, importance of human relationships, that one-on-one contact, integrity and competence. So again, back to those social determinants of health, that's kind of the social justice aspect of guardianship from our approach. And dignity and worth of the person, no matter what stage of life they're in, everybody matters, and everybody can have an opinion about things. And then that human relationship piece of it, and then competence, which really, again, is the organizational part of the program. And then you can see the National Guardianship Association ethical principles have a lot of overlap with the social work principles in terms of dignity and self-reliance and self-determination and so forth. And I know you're going to get copies of this. I won't read every one of them. And I think I already kind of talked about this too, but the standards for decision making. And again, this is something that is probably difficult to do when you're managing 50 people, but and I'm just throwing that out as a general number. But when you're not, meeting somebody monthly and, taking them their favorite snacks and buying them socks, which is a lot, our guardians do those sorts of things. But first ask the person what they want. They are incapacitated, but it doesn't mean they're, they still have, many of them, not all of them, have the ability to express some type of opinion. We had just a few weeks ago, a woman, a guardian, was like, should I put this guy through dialysis or not? I don't know, because that's a lot and his health indicators aren't great, and he's never going to get a donation, a kidney. And do I really want to do that, or should I do palliative care? And I said, well, did you ask him? And she's like, no, I didn't ask him yet. I said, well, ask him, see what he says. Try to just boil it down into the most simple words possible and see what he says. And if you've done that, then great. You can cross that off, that you've done your due diligence of going through sort of the standards for decision making. And she asked him, she said she sat down next to him and talked about he'd have to go somewhere 3 times a week and have a thing and whatever. And his response, well, we can see if it'll work. It was a very, a response you might expect from somebody that had capacity. So whether he really knew what he was saying or not, it's hard to know sometimes, but he responded in a way as if he had some sense of what she was saying, and she could always change her mind. But again, she documented that, which helped in terms of, I guess backing up, because medical decisions, some of them you can't go back on, so it's important that they do their due diligence in terms of why did they make the decisions that they made. Substituted judgment is a step away from asking the person, but really talking to people that once knew them and trying to figure out what would they have done. Were they the type that, we're always going to the doctor every week or every month or every year, or, and then of course, if they had advanced planning documents, that's always the best thing, but not everybody has those. And I just put the website for the National Guardianship Association at the bottom. Here's our event tonight, being co-sponsored with Foothill Acres, which is a assisted living nursing center in Hillsborough. But you can see Chris is making a return appearance tonight, is one of the panelists. And Linda and Kent, who are very involved with our agency, they have also had incapacitated people. They've been guardians. Robert Shanahan, whom is, for any of you in this particular area, is very well known in sort of the elder care community. He's an attorney. Betsy, who is one of our board members, she is very well versed in Medicaid and Medicare. And Linda Bryan, who's a former administrator from Huntington Medical Center, will be there as well. So, and the dinner is free and it costs you nothing. So if you've got nothing to do, let us know and we'd be happy to have you stop by tonight. And here's our contact information. And that's the end of our formal presentation.
Thank you so much. So we do have some questions in the chat. So the first one is, how do you apply to become a guardian, and what counties do you serve?
So I'm sort of in the process of sort of transitioning our model a little bit. What we've done in the past is we've had volunteers in waiting, we would call them, because usually when somebody needs a guardian, they need it pretty fast. So we would screen and have, 6, 7, 8 volunteers waiting. So when we had somebody, we'd be like, here you go. But since we are growing beyond our original borders, I'm changing that up a little bit, and I'm kind of recruiting volunteers. I'm taking referrals from anywhere and accepting them under the condition we can find a volunteer. So it's becoming a little more personalized. So if somebody wanted to become a guardian, they could reach out and we'd be happy to screen them. But if we don't have anybody in that particular area, they could be waiting for a while. But yeah, just reach out to me, go on our website. We have a volunteer application. And you can go through the process and get the training and the background check, and we're happy to do all that. And then And then, we can do more active outreach into your community to say, hey, we have a volunteer waiting right there. So, but again, we're pretty small and grassroots. We don't have many guardianships, and we're looking certainly to grow. So, yeah, did that answer the question?
I would say so.
My question now is, we're serving all of New Jersey if we can, one by one.
All right. Our next question is, if a family needs to apply for guardianship and can't afford it.
That's tough. That's come up. I don't know of any resources, unfortunately, for that. Chris, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's going to depend on the county. And I think that would go back to that scenario and like the surrogate's office. What other avenues could there be to support? Again, the process is unfortunately expensive right now, but people do still get it through.
Well, in a lot of families, just speaking from personal experience, I mean, I guess I acted in the capacity of a guardian, but and I had power of attorney, and you can make all those decisions with power of attorney. So depending on the situation, I mean, I think a lot of families don't take that extra legal piece, because the power of attorney piece of it does give them a lot of power, to make a lot of decisions. Which doesn't cost nearly as much either. So I think that's probably the go-to. Again, non-legal information I'm passing on. But yeah, I'm not aware of resources.
Does guardianship always start with reaching out to an attorney? Can anyone make a referral?
Can anybody make a referral, like if they have a neighbor that they think needs guardianship, that type of a thing?
That's all the question says, doesn't it?
Right. So I mean, if it's somebody in a community that is incapacitated, that's when you need to probably call Adult Protective Services. If they're in danger to themselves, that becomes an APS type of a referral, and they're the ones that can bring the case of guardianship and have the resources to do that. Yeah, I mean, but if it's a private matter and it's just a family member, then yeah, you would reach out to an attorney.
All right. When a person becomes a guardian, do they become financially liable for their bills or debt? I have heard that this is a reason why some people do not want to become a guardian.
Not at all. No. It's you become responsible for managing them in an ethical, responsible way, but that's what all the bookkeeping is about. So everything should be kept separately. There's no merging of accounts. Everything says, the person's name, guardian, with the guardian's name, but it's very separate. So there's no, unless they're unethical and they're, and something, somebody brings some type of, accusation against them, I suppose. But no, I mean, people get nervous about that. We have heard that. What if this person has a son and I become her guardian and he accuses me of doing this, and now, oh my God. Yeah, you just have to do your due diligence to keep the books, accurately. And never commingle any funds. I mean, that's the 101 of guardianship as well.
Do you assist with supported decision-making as an alternative to guardianship?
We don't. My organization doesn't, but I know that it's very much some things, particularly in the IDD community, that because guardianship is stripping somebody of their rights, and it really should be sort of the last resort if possible. So, but we personally do not. Guardianship is a step beyond that supportive decision-making. Chris, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, that's exactly it. And this is the whole purpose of trying to encourage everyone that we serve to do their advanced directives, health proxy, power of attorney, living will. Talk about this now to limit the risk of not having your wishes, hopes, and expectations documented. The people that you nominate are comfortable and willing to do what is necessary to make sure your voice is heard. This should be the last step and should be avoided at the end of the day at all costs, if possible.
All right. My next question is, how do we know when a client is incapacitated?
So, I mean, that's the part Chris talked about in terms of, I mean, Chris can talk about red flags. I'm sure he probably sees them all the time, but the only way you're going to really know is if you go through the process of having them be examined by those medical professional, whom we will get back to you guys on the exact credentials. I see was a little debate in the chat about that. And yeah, but in terms of red flags, I mean, I could talk off the top of my head, but I think Chris sees that on a regular basis.
Right. It's, listening to your head, your heart, or your gut as a social worker. If you're going and visiting someone, they're wearing the same clothes, the house is in disrepair, there's neglect, there's a high likelihood of exploitation. That there's falls, that, these are all signs that there should be a deeper dive in to see what other alternatives can there be. Again, I'm all for personal autonomy, but if you leave someone and you in the back of your mind are wondering, what am I going to walk into the next time I have a planned visit, there should be conversations with your supervisor or whoever else in your agency or beyond, because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and seeing what sort of additional services could be brought in board. We got to try to keep people safe while honoring it's a thin line.
I mean, the more obvious signs are they're wandering down the highway. I mean, that's a few of our folks, where the police kept picking them up.
5 a.m. and they're
Right.
on.
I mean, those are more obvious signs. They'll start coming into contact with the police. We had a guy who was referred to us recently. His apartment complex called APS, who called us. He lost his Section 8 because he didn't realize he was checking, I don't need it anymore. He didn't fill the form out correctly, and then, APS went in and he's got his stove on because his electricity had been shut off, or his gas. He's trying to get some heat because something happened and he just didn't understand, and he didn't pay the bill, and he didn't understand that it's a hazard to keep, so just a lot of things in the apartments, the one that caught it and made the referral because he was living alone with no family, and yeah, so.
If you leave and you feel that a person that you just saw is a high risk of danger to self, others, and or property, it's time to have that conversation with your supervisor or bring it to Adult Protective Services that has a different set of screening than you might possibly.
All right, so we have about 7 minutes left and plenty of questions in the chat. So we're going to try and not rapid fire them, but we're going to try and get to them all. So,
All right.
So who pays for your services? And then we have a lot of questions about, do you have clients in Camden County?
We are a private nonprofit. So we are supported by grants, donations, and the law does allow a 6% commission on income to be taken for guardianship. And in our case, the volunteers don't receive that. That comes to our agency. So I think the average commission that our agency receives per person is about $120 a month, but it is one of our income streams. So yeah, there's certain court things that any guardian is permitted to get. But yeah, no, we're free.
Are there guidelines in each county to add a co-guardian?
Are there guidelines in each county to add a co-guardian? I don't know. I Chris, I don't know. I mean, there are people, we have a couple that is serving as co-guardians, but that was part of the original judgment when they came on as guardians. We had a couple best friends that wanted to do it as a community service project together. They were co-guardians on the legal paperwork, but I'm not sure if that's really what the question's asking or not. And I don't think it differs by county. It's mostly the state thing.
Approximately how much is it for a family member to apply for guardianship?
What I hear, Chris, maybe you can talk about 4,000 to 8,000 in that realm.
You're looking probably 5 to 10, because depending on court costs, processing, it is unfortunately very expensive.
All right. How does a social worker who comes into contact with an older adult who has no family and who is losing capacity assist with guardianship? Who would be the right person to initiate guardianship legally?
I mean, again, that's a referral to probably APS, which triggers the rest of it. And my job for my organization is trying to educate everybody that we're an option, because we're not too well known yet. Because then they're going to end up referring to the state options. It's kind of the fallback.
Is there a different name for a guardian if the individual is suffering from a mental illness?
No, but I did want to make one comment about that. You know, there's a real need, and you guys probably see this. So there's a state option for people 60 and up, and there's a state option for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. There's really no government option for people with severe mental illness that are found to be incapacitated. But yeah, they're still a guardian. I mean, if it rises to that level, or it might be more supportive decision making, again, depending on the individual and what level of incapacity. And some people get their capacity back. I mean, we've had at least one guardianship where the person got it back. They got whatever it was, and it was before my time, but they got whatever treatment they needed and were able to gain it back legally through the court.
Does the family have to pay privately for those 2 assessments, or does the court?
Yeah, the court doesn't pay for it. We're back to, that's a big issue. You know, we're trying to think about how to find some, you know, grant funds or something that, like, we would not administer those because it would be a bit of a conflict, but maybe partnering with legal services. I saw somebody put legal services in the chat. You know, I think it's a real sort of crux in the whole thing is the money piece of it, and who's paying for that if you're not going through APS or a hospital or something.
How do the volunteer guardians get paid? How much do they earn for being a guardian?
Nothing. They're volunteers, as I said. You know, we do volunteer retention. We give them jackets, and, you know, I do a drawing for gift cards once a month if they're, you know, doing all their case notes.
Services with cookies.
Yeah.
And
yeah. No, they truly are volunteers in the best sense.
Someone has, it looks like, copy and pasted Title 30 into the chat. How does one get guardianship back?
Not an attorney. I would imagine they'd have to petition the court, but I don't know the ins and outs of that.
So there's a yearly, essentially, re-up that.
Oh, right. Yeah. I forgot about that piece. Right. So there's a thing, a statement of well-being. Sorry, Chris. It has to be completed annually. And within that statement of well-being, which is a required court document, the person has to be re-examined by a medical professional that documents, yes, this person is still incapacitated and in need of a guardian. So there is that, you know, that quality control piece annually. But if the person differed from the opinion of the medical community, then of course they would have to probably take matters into their own hand, I would guess.
All right, so there are no more questions in the chat, and we have like less than a minute left. So I'm going to thank you, Julie and Chris, for this wonderful discussion. Thank you everybody for coming. There is a recording of this on Facebook. There will also be a recording sent to your email along with the PowerPoint that has Julie and Chris's information on it if you would like to contact them. And is email the best way to contact both of you?
Yeah, probably.
Email would be best.
I don't know,
And-
Chris.
No, yes, email would be best. And again, Julie would probably run point with most of the questions.
All right. So thank you all so much for coming, and we will see you at the next community conversation. So goodbye, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for your interest.
I'm going to end this for, nope,